June 2024 outbound transfer cycle mission post placement process was also deferred due to the shortfall in the compensation of employees' budget. Additional funding is thus required to cover the shortfall and fill the other critical vacancies at the head office and missions abroad. The department will soon advertise a cadet program and youth development program critical to the national youth development imperative and the department's future capacity needs. DIRCO will continue its ongoing endeavors to achieve organizational renewal and change. One of the critical pillars is enhancing efficiency and effectiveness through finalizing the organizational structure review process. The primary objective of the process is the streamlining of the business units and their processes, as well as the optimization of scarce resources to leverage global economic opportunities in advancing our national interest. This budget signifies our determination to balance fiscal prudence in the imperative to support our citizens and invest in our nation's future. South Africa proudly places Africa at the center of its foreign policy and steadfastly committed to Agenda 2063. Our aim is to ensure the peace, development, and the security of the continent, aligning with the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and Sustainable Development Goals. We have established 46 structured bilateral mechanisms, 12 of which are at the presidential level. We believe a stronger AU will have a larger, more coordinated influence on global matters. Through the AU, we will ensure the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, a flagship project of the Agenda 2063, aimed at creating a single Africa market. The AFCFTA will eliminate trade barriers and boost intra-Africa trade, advance trade in value-added production, and continue to establish regional value chains. The African Development Bank report on Africa's economic outlook, published in May, assessed that Africa will continue to be the second fastest growing region in the world. The publication projects that Africa will record an average of 3.7% in real gross domestic product this year, which is slightly higher compared to the 3.2% growth realized in 2023. This growth is a testament to the Africa's continent's potential and our foreign policy's positive impact. Through cooperation with countries in our continent, we hope to ramp up manufacturing capacity, infrastructure development, and the building of regional value chains in the Southern African Development Community to support intra-Africa trade. Given the continent's abundant mineral endowment, we need to ensure that these resources benefit our people through beneficiation and local value addition. It is time for the continent to develop common strategy for extracting and protecting our critical minerals, such as lithium. Africa is experiencing an intense scramble for these strategic minerals, and as such, a strategy will assist in preserving our supply and also our beneficiation strategies. To stimulate economic growth, we must intensify our efforts to help South Africa companies and state-owned enterprises engage in meaningful opportunities in Africa. We are looking to strengthen our partnerships in Africa to address business challenges and to create a favorable environment for conducting businesses by South African companies in the continent. We are pleased to report that South Africa has maintained a strong position as an investor in Africa over the past year, with over 450 projects in various countries. This achievement results from our coordinated approach and investment initiatives. We commend the efforts of our development finance institutions, such as the Development Bank of Southern Africa and the Industrial Development Corporation. We will continue working closely with our neighbors in the Southern African region to expand and strengthen collaboration in areas such as oil, gas, green hydrogen, water resources, as well as improvements in the movements of goods and services. These initiatives are important to bolster our economy and improve the livelihoods of our people, while contributing towards the full attainment of the regional integration agenda. Work is underway to hasten the completion of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, Phase 2, to increase energy cooperation with Mozambique and Namibia. And we are working to implement the renewed Grand Inga Treaty with the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have established the coordination mechanism for the economic diplomacy, consisting of government departments and the private sector. This mechanism aims to facilitate cooperation among relevant public and private sector stakeholders in advancing South Africa's interests in the African continent. We are committed to actively participate in the SADC peace efforts and support post-conflict reconstructions within our means. We must work towards fostering sustainable peace in northern Mozambique following the conclusion of the SADC mission in July 2024. Additionally, we will maintain our engagement in peace and security efforts in the eastern part of the DRC to support the country in achieving its developmental objectives. Our hearts goes to our brave soldiers who sacrificed their lives in the line of duty in Mozambique and most recently in the DRC. These individuals were true peacemakers, and we honor their service and sacrifice. Societies worldwide are grappling with existential challenges, including climate change, disruptive artificial intelligence technology, geopolitical fragmentation, illegal migration, the rising cost of living, inequality and social cohesion, and insecurity. These issues have brought about the social instability across borders. To effectively address these challenges, we need solidarity and collective action amongst progressive forces across the globe. The evolving international world order necessitates the strengthening of the non-alignment movement. South Africa's policy of active non-alignment is not reactive, but an affirmative agenda. It is not about being neutral or abstaining from world affairs, but putting forward a unifying agenda through a dialogue to achieve peace for developing countries that do not wish to take sides in great power rivalry. As sovereign nations, we seek independent foreign policies aligning with our developmental priorities. This makes non-alignment countries useful mediators in conflicts like that between Russia and Ukraine. The impact of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine has been felt globally, most notable on the African continent, as it has led to significant increase on consumer prices, particularly of food and energy. This underscores the critical need for immediate global cooperation to end conflicts and address their current economic impact. South Africa coordinated the first ever Africa Peace Initiative beyond the continent's borders when President Ramaphosa led a delegation of 6 African heads of state to Ukraine and Russia last year. In the emerging world order, we are more cognizant than ever that economic prosperity largely depends on stability, peace, respect for the rule of law. There can be no peace in any part of the world where people are being oppressed or struggling under the yoke of colonialism and occupation. We will continue to engage the world as equal. South Africa's non-alignment and universality posture will remain sacrosanct. We need to redouble our efforts to work in solidarity with those who are resisting occupation, oppression, and human rights abuses and injustices. South Africa will continue to act within the global institutions to protect the rights of Palestinians in Gaza and ensure the fair application of international law for all. This also informed our International Court of Justice application. South Africa also led the referral by 6 states of the situation in Palestine to the International Criminal Court. We will continue preparing and managing the ICJ case against Israel and providing observation on the situation in Palestine before the International Court of Justice. As our foreign policy is anchored in our history of solidarity with those struggling against oppression and occupation, we will continue to support the people of Western Sahara in their quest for self-determination. We call on the United Nations to take urgent steps towards holding the long-promised referendum on the self-determination in Western Sahara. Multilateralism is another key pillar of our foreign policy, and we have capitalized on our membership in several multilateral forums to advance the African agenda and works towards creating a more equitable, rules-based multilateral system and more just and equitable world. South Africa engages in international relations in accordance with its commitment to international law and justice, protecting human rights and advancing peace and security. South Africa has consistently advocated for the reform of global governance institutions such as the UN Security Council, which does not reflect current global political economic realities and needs to be more representative of and responsive to the needs of the global South. South Africa has also capitalized on its memberships of BRICS and the G20 to place Africa and the global South on the agenda. As Africa voices increases in the G20 with the inclusion of the African Union as a permanent member, the calls for transformed global order must be amplified. South Africa hosted the 15th BRICS Summit, expanding full membership to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, strengthening the African voice within BRICS. South Africa continues to play a central role in combating climate change and was instrumental in securing COP28 outcomes. We will continue to build this great nation. As you are aware, we will be hosting the G20 here in our country, welcoming all people of the world. We'll use that platform further to amplify the voice of the African people and to advocate for economic justice and inclusion for the marginalized and also for the developing nations of the world. We will continue to address our most pressing national challenges and forge unity in our continent. Our vision of realizing a better South Africa, a better Africa, and a better world remains our driving mission. I wish to thank the DG and senior management and staff of the Department of International Relations for a warm welcome. I submit the budget vote of the department. Thank you.
I now invite the Honorable T. Sukanyile.
Honorable Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister, and the honorable members. This year, our Parliament celebrates 30 years of South Africa's democratic dispensation. As such, in terms of international relations, it is important that we look closely at the fundamental principles that define what we do and how we do it. As a country, we have a history that shapes the way we relate with the world around us. And it is important that we do not forget the challenges we have overcome as a nation. But while we reflect on the past, it is also important that we balance our past with our values, our interests in a way that contribute to both our country's prosperity and creating a better world for future generations. Honourable members, the international system finds itself at a critical period where all nations of the world must carefully scrutinize their policies and make strategic calculations about what they aspire to achieve for the benefit of the citizens. At the core of South Africa's foreign policy, is its commitment to creating a better Africa and a better world. But as I noted when I began this address, these values were shaped by many factors that begin with South Africa's unique history and identity. In particular, South Africa's values were developed after a long struggle against apartheid and oppression it represented. Today, as we stand at a pivotal juncture of our nation's history, a moment where our choices will shape not only our future, but also our role on the global stage. It is with great pride and a deep sense of responsibility that I address this teamed house on a strategic imperative on enhancing South Africa's partnership in Asia and Middle East. In an era defined by rapid geopolitical transformation, it is imperative that we adopt a visionary, proactive foreign policy to safeguard our national interest, drive economic growth, and elevate our global standing. Economic diplomacy is at its heart of our international engagement. As we navigate complexities of global supply chain issues and emerging market dynamics, it is crucial to explore new trade and investment opportunities in Asia and Middle East. These regions offer vast potential for South African businesses and investors. China remains South Africa's largest global trading partner. There is an impressive growth in trade, which highlights the strength of our economic relationship. We must address the growing trade deficit. Moving forward, it is crucial for us to enhance export of value-added goods and negotiate greater market access for a wider range of South African products in China. By focusing in these strategies, we can work together a more balanced trade relationship and maximize the benefit of our partnership with China. We are committed to driving economic growth by seeking strategic international partnership and investment, opening new markets for South African goods and services. By doing so, we can diversify our trade portfolio, mitigate risk associated with traditional markets, and create sustainable jobs at home. Our embassies and consulates across Asia and Middle East are being empowered with resources to facilitate business linkages, promote South African products, and attract foreign direct investment. The 2024 budget allocates substantial funds to support these initiatives, ensuring that our economic diplomacy is both proactive and impactful. The department has to implement 5 departmental programs which must produce outcomes of its multilateral and multi-state engagement. Expenditure to support these activities, they are within the international relations program that I've already talked about. The work conducted within this program is imbued with the pillars of South Africa's foreign policy. South Africa, as a responsible global actor, is committed to contributing the resolution of these crises. We support diplomatic efforts to end the conflict in Ukraine and address its global impact. Our stance on international justice is clear and unwavering. South Africa remains steadfast in its support for Palestinian people in their struggle for self-determination. The ongoing conflict has caused immense suffering. We call for a just and long-lasting solution that recognizes the rights of Palestinians to statehood and security. We advocate for a two-state solution where Israel and Palestine coexist peacefully with secure and recognized borders. Our commitment to this cause is rooted in our history and principles of human dignity and equality. We will advocate for peaceful resolution to conflict and support international efforts to promote stability and security. In this spirit, South Africa will leverage its diplomatic channels and multilateral platforms to champion peace and security initiatives, ensuring that we contribute to global stability. China remains as one of our important partners. The expansion of bilateral trade and major infrastructure investment and support to South Africa's green economy transition are key aspects of ongoing cooperation, including energy projects, vocational training, and poverty alleviation initiative. These efforts aim to enhance cooperation, create jobs, and improve livelihood in South Africa. As part of this strategic partnership, we will focus on sectors such as manufacturing, agriculture, technology, where South Africa has a competitive advantage. The 2024 budget support initiatives aimed at enhancing our export capacity and competitiveness. Honourable members, the department in its budget has expressed its continued commitment to African agenda. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a landmark initiative that holds immense potential for Africa's economic transformation by promoting intra-African trade and regional integration. The AfCFTA can drive sustainable development and prosperity across the continent. The 2024 budget allocates resources to enhance our infrastructure, streamline trade processes, and support local industries in accessing our new market. By leveraging the AfCFTA, we aim to boost our exports, create jobs, and foster inclusive growth. The disruption caused by COVID-19 pandemic and geopolitical tensions have exposed vulnerabilities in global supply chain, South Africa recognizes the need to build more resilient and diversified supply chain to safeguard our economic interests. We will work with international partners, particularly Asia and the Middle East, to develop strategic supply chains initiatives. These include securing critical supplies, enhancing logistical networks, fostering cooperation in sectors such as pharmaceuticals, technology, and renewable energy. Honorable members, enhancing South Africa's strategic partnership in Asia and the Middle East is vital for our economic prosperity, regional stability, global influence. By focusing on economic diplomacy, supporting regional peace initiatives, deepening partnership with China, and protecting sustainable development through AFCFTA, we are charting a path to a brighter and more prosperous future. I urge this esteemed House to support the 2024 budget of this department, which provides necessary resources to achieve its goal. Together, let us build a South Africa that is economically robust, globally respected, committed to the principles of peace, justice, and sustainable development. I thank you.
The Honorable Powell.
Thank you. Honorable members, for many years, the world watched the stunning inconsistency with which the ANC navigated South Africa's foreign policy with increasing disbelief. Following the loss of the ANC's majority at the recent election and the DA's participation in the government of national unity, it now represents a renewed hope for South Africa on the world stage. We know that as the geopolitical sands continue to shift, those of us invested in the political values of freedom, tolerance, and democracy must do everything in our power to stem the rising tides of populism, fanaticism, oppression, and tyranny. Because if we as a global community have learned a single lesson from history, it is that the most prosperous societies on earth also have the highest freedom and democracy ratings. This is not a coincidence, it is an empirical fact. Freedom transcends the barriers of identity, race, religion, and culture, and engenders the protection of individual rights. When democracies work together to preserve a rules-based international order that promotes individual freedom, political franchise, and universal human rights, people thrive. Deputy Speaker, whilst almost 1 billion rand is now allocated by DIRCO to African Union fees and almost $500 million allocated to SADC fees in the midterm, much of Africa still remains desperately poor, undemocratic, and besieged by conflict. This is because despite preaching the doctrine of human rights and democracy from the podium, for many years our government actively worked to advance the agenda of some of the most oppressive regimes in the world. One need look no further than neighboring Zimbabwe and the flagrant disregard of the SADC Election Observer Report, which found that the election in that country was neither free nor fair, as an example of the lack of accountability that has characterized our approach to diplomacy for decades. Our voting track record at the UN over recent years bears further witness. Since 1994, South Africa abstained on more than 68% of human rights-related resolutions at the United Nations. In doing so, our government betrayed peace processes throughout the world in countries like Syria, Sudan, and Zimbabwe in order to protect party political affiliates. Our government's failure to not only uphold human rights on a consistent basis in previous years, but to implement a meaningful and predictable foreign policy agenda was a missed opportunity and a grave disappointment to all of those who had held our country in such high esteem. Given the rise of populism and the democratic backslide now occurring in many parts of the world, the time has never been more urgent for those of us invested in freedom, peace, and democracy to now work together in building relationships on the basis of our shared values and aspirations. I stand before you today in order to send a resounding message to the international community that the people of this nation remain committed to South Africa's cherished constitutional values, and these values must now be applied consistently. It's our belief that South Africa's key foreign policy objectives must be to promote and uphold the principles of the UN Charter, whilst advancing our key domestic economic and security objectives. Through our participation in the Government of National Unity, that is precisely what the DA intends to now achieve for South Africa. Working together with our partners in government, we will ensure that our foreign policy outlook aligns with the South African Constitution, universal human rights, and equality before the law. Regional and international stability will be underpinned by our shared security interests, and we will ensure the preservation of an open market economy guided by mutually beneficial trade partnerships. Honorable members, more must now be done to strengthen relationships with our largest trading partners who continue to demonstrate goodwill by investing into South Africa, and sadly often with very little recognition. The European Union remains the #1 foreign direct investor into South Africa, accounting for almost 50% of total FDI stocks, followed by the United Kingdom, the United States, and China. These relationships cannot and must not be taken for granted, and it is our shared responsibility to now actively facilitate cooperation and enhanced dialogue with these partners whose continued goodwill and investment feed the people of our nation. Lastly, the Democratic Alliance will continue to advocate for the reform of our global governance institutions, where for generations the Global South and Africa in specific has had inadequate representation. It is my hope that those of you with access to these spaces will join with us in pursuing these objectives. By working together, we now finally have an opportunity to reset and to meaningfully contribute towards building a truly free and fair world. I thank you.
Now invite the Honorable Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kaites, goeiemiddag. Hello, and to all my people, away. I would like to begin by thanking first and foremost my Heavenly Father, His Son, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and my closest friend, the Holy Spirit, for this opportunity. I also extend my gratitude to my family, my other father, Msholozi Nomalala, the rightful president of South Africa, Ubaba Jacob Zuma. We will fight here while you take them on out there, sir. I want to thank you, and I want to honor my king, the king of many Kwe and San queens and kings, Honorable Kuba Glenn Taibosh, the MK party leadership, and most importantly, our voters. Your faith and trust in me and all our MK party representatives is what drives us. We fight for you, for all of you, and for all the poor and marginalized, regardless of race, tribe, or tongue. Let me start by clarifying that MK is not a Zulu-only party. It's a Pan-Africanist party whose vision is the restoration of African, Aboriginal, and Indigenous peoples and their leaders as the rightful land and mineral rights owners under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, or UNDRIP, which South Africa signed in 2007 but fails to implement. Our goal is the consequent liberation of all our people from poverty, indentured servitude on white-owned farms, and the eradication of poverty, crime, and townships and shacks. We stand against the racist and exclusionary white monopoly capital ownership of our economy and the theft of sacred Aboriginal, First Nation, and African indigenous lands. Pan-Africanism is reflected in all that we do and say. Honourable members, I rise today to discuss and debate the report on the strategic plans, annual performance plans, and budget allocations of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation and the African Renaissance Fund tabled by the Minister. As an MK member of the DIRCO committee, it must be made very clear that we cannot, in good conscience, approve or vote in favour of this budget. Today, we speak against the adoption of this report for several reasons. We have only had the presentation for over 48 hours without sight of detailed information and just a basic strategic overview of the DIRCO budget. DIRCO has been paralyzed by leadership struggles, internal politicking, and point scoring. DGs and staff have been wrongfully fired and irregularly offered golden handshakes at taxpayers' costs. Meanwhile, the department supposedly struggles for funding and has had a 5%, R500 million cut from its budget this year by the ANC executive. This cut is part of an agenda to defund this department, to cover up corruption and limit parliamentary oversight over foreign missions. The portfolio committee is new, but rushing documents through oversight structures is how we ended up in this mess that we have in South Africa now. We've had no access to detailed information and requested, and we to make a determination on whether the budget can be supported. We will not be part of a rubber stamp exercise our first week in office. We are elected to hold this GNU accountable, and that starts now. We demand full transparency, open books, source documents, audited reports, lease agreements, and properties owned by DIRCO. We want to see the development plans and which companies were awarded these contracts. We want a complete overhaul of DIRCO where cadre deployment is stopped and we build our diplomats fit for purpose. Ambassadorship should not be a political golden handshake and retirement parachutes for out-of-favor comrades who spend more time doing their own business and promoting white monopoly capital JSE-listed companies rather than finding ways to promote black and colored SMMEs in foreign countries. Why is the ANC sabotaging the work of this committee by cutting funding overseas trips when DIRCO's entire mandate is outside the country? What are these missions hiding, and what is the executive hiding by cancelling these oversight trips of this committee in violation of the executive's constitutional mandates? DIRCO has a major responsibility to project who we are and what we offer as South Africans to the world and to the people here to experience the best our country has to offer so that they can invest, spend $2 billion and purchase South African goods and services. However, we cannot project the image of a wealthy, developed African country when the majority of our people live in abject poverty. No, we need to project the true image of this country as a colonially owned and managed country where the rich get richer and hoard wealth based on their ethnicity and race, while the majority are left in poverty because of the color of their skin. We need a more ethical approach. Let me be clear that MK is neither anti-white, anti-Jewish, nor anti-Christian. We are pro-justice, against oppression, and stand against any secular government that places ethnic cleansing above the human rights of others and engages in acts of violence against an unarmed civilian population. The MK position on the Palestine conflict is simple but complex. Do whatever it takes to stop the genocide immediately. MK has called for the boycotting and closing of the South African mission to Israel until the genocide of innocent civilians is stopped. Both sides need to compromise, and Hamas must safely return the remaining hostages to their families. Both parties must return to the negotiating table, forced by the global community to discuss and implement a two-state solution. Leaders must be held accountable for all the atrocities committed on both sides, and Benjamin Netanyahu needs to be tried and held accountable for his genocidal actions and exposed by the ICJ and the ICC. As MK, we would like to commend and fully support the actions and examples set by the young presidents of Niger and Mali as they exemplify a new wave of leadership committed to true sovereignty, economic independence, and a break from colonial legacies. Their bold decisions reflect a growing determination across Africa to reclaim control of our national natural resources, reduce dependence on foreign powers, and foster unity and solidarity amongst African nations. Another critical aspect of DIRCO's mandate should be strengthening our ties with other African nations. Pan-Africanism is not merely a slogan, but a guiding principle for MK and of our foreign policy. We must foster closer economic, political, and social ties with our African brothers and sisters. This means actively participating in supporting the African Union, promoting regional integration, and working towards the economic liberation of the continent. Our focus should be on developing and implementing policies that encourage trade within Africa as Pan-Africanists, reduce dependence on former colonial powers, and build a self-sustaining and resilient African economy. By supporting initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, we can help create a single market for goods and services, enhancing economic growth and development across the continent by beneficiating our minerals and keeping the money here in Africa and not sending it out over there. At the core of our international relations should be a commitment to upholding human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. South Africa's foreign policy must be rooted in these principles. This is the first time in 30 years that a Khoisan royal person is speaking in this house, that there's two Khoisan leaders in this house after 30 years of oppression by the ANC and the GNU. We are taking back our land. We are taking back our resources. We are implementing the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and there's nothing the GNU is going to do to stop us. We are fighting for our people. Our people will come out of poverty, and we will lead them. And we will not be led by the GNU for much longer. So you can get used to this. We are claiming our land back, and we're giving the land back to the kings and to the rulers and the queens and the people who have owned this land from the very beginning. We are a First Nation amongst First Nations. We are over thousands and thousands of years old. Everybody else here in South Africa came only a few hundred years ago. This is our land, and we want to share it with our indigenous brothers and sisters, even our white brothers and sisters. But we want you to know things are going to change. MK is here. Kwaza umkende, mtonto, kwaza.
Now I invite the Honorable Montwedi.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I think before I go to my speech, I need to address two things that were said by both the Minister and the Acting Chair. I think the Minister is misleading the House when he comes here and makes a statement saying that South African foreign policy is guided by the GNU Statement of Intent. We know that is not true. We all know the posture of the DA on the Palestine. We know the posture of the DA on all the progressive internationalists. That is number one. And if you thought, Minister, that by ushering DAs with blue lamps would actually make them to lose their identity, which is why they're hating our people in Gaza, that thing will never happen. Now, the other issue by the Acting Chair is that the Chair comes here and speak of a two-state solution in Palestine. A two-state solution will not assist there. The issue in Palestine is about dispossession. And up until that issue is addressed, the conflict there will never come to an end. And I'm not shocked that the ANC is saying this because the same ANC has sold out on its founding principle of returning South Africa's stolen land. I'm not shocked that today they're speaking what they're saying about there in Palestine about a two-state solution. It's probably because they've sold out on what actually brought them as an ANC. Chairperson, as the EFF were encouraged by the move of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger on the signing of the Alliance of Sahel State Confederation Treaty. This bold step towards greater integration in the Sahel region signifies a monumental shift away from the Western control, showcasing the resolve of new young leaders to rid their countries of neo-colonial and reclaim their solidarity. We are calling all African youth from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar, and in the diaspora. Let us all be at the forefront of ridding our continent of all imperialist worshipping leaders. Let us elect and install African leaders guided by Pan-Africanism, and let us work to protect these leaders from Western economic mafias. We must send a very clear message to all progressive internationalists that the EFF, unlike the ANC, will never sell out. We remain worried as an organization about the reactionary elements in the GNU of the ANC of President Ramaphosa and the DA, IFP, PA, Freedom Front Plus, and others that continue to undermine the fight for the unity of the African people. The same reactionary forces in bed with the former ruling party that care less about the genocide in Gaza and continue to be funded by the state of Israel and other Western powers. The same reactionaries and neo-colonial elements that have continued to undermine the work of BRICS and are threatened by the emergence of the South-to-South trade relations. These are the same reactionaries that want us to continue the exploitative relationship with the West that has got no interest of developing Africa, whose interest is to exploit the mineral deposits in Africa. We want to reassure the people of the world, our continent, we want to reassure the people of the world of our continued solidarity with the people of Western Sahara, Palestine, Cuba, Russia, and all other progressive internationalists. The Portfolio Committee of International Relations and Cooperation received a presentation from the department and the entity on the annual performance plans. As the EFF, we remain concerned about the budget cuts that the department has been experiencing for the past 3 financial years. With the current budget deficit of around 425 million, which makes it practically impossible for the department to achieve some of its objectives. Office rentals for missions abroad remains amongst key cost drivers to the expenditure of the department, and we agree with the recommendation of the Portfolio Committee for that the department must move from leased properties to renovating its own properties and to also start developing their own properties. As the EFF, we remain concerned of the delay in government on finally closing the Israel embassy after an EFF-sponsored motion was adopted by the National Assembly, and we will not rest until we have completely cut all ties with the racist state of Israel that has continued with the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. We must commend the department on the application of the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in Gaza Strip, and encourage that the matter be followed up to finality until Israel is held accountable for crimes against humanity on the people of Palestine. We are, however, not pleased with the role the country is playing in consolidating and strengthening the ability the continent to resolve her own issues in areas such as defense and trade. We have long called for a unified defense approach to resolving foreign-sponsored violence in the continent. As things stand, the African Standby Force has poorly defined mandates and is not resourced enough to be able to quell war and violence in the continent. We are deeply worried about what is happening in DRC and disappointed that despite our soldiers in that country, South Africa has not been as vocal about permanently resolving the crisis in Congo. We have a responsibility as South Africans to ensure that continental bodies like SADC and PAP are revived and given its teeth to lobby for peace in war-hit countries in Africa for the benefit of the people. We are pushing for want to push for a resolution that SADC and PAP, that all military bases in Africa by foreign power must be removed, as those bases have no interest of developing the continent, but continue to exploit Africa's mineral deposit. As part of the AU Agenda 2063, we wanted to push that we must have, as part of ending the AU had agreed they will end conflicts in 2020, and that has not happened. And we want to put that back into the agenda of AU, that all conflicts in Africa must actually be ended. And the EFF rejects this budget votes as it falls far too short of this aspiration. Thank you, House Chair.
I now invite the Honourable Dwango to the podium.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, Honourable Minister, Honourable Deputy Ministers, Honourable colleagues, from 2022 up until the present, the war in Ukraine, the Israeli-Hamas conflict, the energy crisis, and hyperinflation caused multiple economic shocks and stagnation across the continents. Although there has been a decline in extreme poverty in middle-income nations, poverty in the world's poorest nations, and those impacted by instability, wars, or violence remains higher than it was before COVID-19. The majority of these deeply impoverished areas are in sub-Saharan Africa, with the places where it is most difficult to tackle extreme poverty being rural areas and regions impacted by conflicts. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation's vision is an African continent which is prosperous, peaceful, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and united, and which contributes to a world that is just and equitable. However, it is difficult to understand this vision when the socio-economic circumstances of our country are far from just and equitable for South Africans. The average South African who is struggling to find employment and searching for ways to ensure that there is food on the table each day is proof that this department still has a long way to go in its economic diplomatic endeavors to ensure that our country is just and equitable, let alone the continent of Africa and the world. As the IFP, we must state that we are proudly African, but we are also, first and foremost, proudly South African. Perhaps under this new administration, this department's first action step should be ensuring that their house is in order before venturing out to aid other households. A good starting point would be for the minister to exercise greater oversight to ensure that those guilty of unauthorized and wasteful expenditure face the appropriate consequences. For at least the past 2 financial terms under the previous administration, we have been listening to the same report by the Auditor General, citing weak internal controls and a lack of accountability measures as proponents for fruitless and wasteful expenditure. The flagrant disregard for the proper stewardship of public funds by this department has been truly unacceptable and presents an opportunity for this new administration to hit the ground running by doing better. The department states that one of its founding values is Batupili. Hopefully, under the guidance and leadership of this new administration, which includes the IFP, it will finally be able to breathe life into the value by showing how it puts the people first. In consideration of the comments made, the IFP accepts the budget. I thank you.
Honourable members, I now have on my list a speaker from the PA, but I do not see a speaker. Not, then we proceed. A speaker from Action SA. We don't have a speaker there. Then I proceed to the Deputy Minister, the Honourable Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, Dr. Lorette, Minister Lamola, honorable members of the PC, MPs, Director General of DIRCO, and members of the Foreign Service of South Africa, ladies and gentlemen. Karl Marx once wrote in 1835 that history bestows glory and greatness to those men and women who have ennobled themselves by working for the common good of their society. As the executive authority of the 7th administration, we will ennoble ourselves to work for the common good of our society. The deepening of foreign policy priorities centered on 4 concentric circles should therefore become more urgent and critical, encapsulating, amongst others, Pan-Africanism, Global South solidarity, cooperation with the Northern Hemisphere, and the transformation of global governance institutions. Over the past year, the department has worked hard at consolidating our relationship with countries from the group of Latin America and the Caribbean, commonly known as the GRULAC. We share, ladies and gentlemen, a special bond with Cuba as a strategic, historical, political, and development partner in the Caribbean region, centered on shared values of freedom, solidarity, and progressive internationalism. South Africa, therefore, will unequivocally continue to oppose the continuation of USA economic blockade against Cuba and will support the annual resolution at UNGA on the necessity of ending the economic, commercial, and financial blockade against Cuba and the removal, ladies and gentlemen, and members of Cuba from the US State Department list of states sponsoring terrorism. South Africa shares a common history and cultural heritage with Brazil, who is our biggest trading partner, and home to the 2nd largest African diaspora in the Americas region. We'll support and work with Brazil as it hosts the 6th Region Africa Diaspora Conference in August 2024, in which South Africa have committed to participate in. The world has evolved from one characterized as being led by one hegemon and being subjected to unilateral conduct to one of multipolarity, which ordinarily members should imply the deepening of multilateralism. While living in an emerging proversal multipolar world, and South Africa's doctrine of universality, the right to relate with as many countries in the world, irrespective of political or economic orientation, is a doctrine which we inherited from the forebear of our democracy, Nelson Mandela. It is therefore imperative to continue to pursue the deepening of cooperation with a more industrialized North, particularly with members of the G7, in accordance with the principles of equality and universal respect for international law. The USA strategy towards sub-Saharan Africa identifies the region as critical to advance the global priorities of the US. It is within this context that the USA remains an important strategic partner in the Northern Hemisphere. It continues to be a leading source of development assistance through its Presidential Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. Members, Western Europe remains a key market for export goods and services from South Africa, and the EU remains a crucial strategic partner in addressing South Africa's triple challenges of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. South Africa is the only African country and one of 10 countries globally that has a strategic partnership with the EU. We'll therefore prepare to host the 8th South African EU Summit, building on a successful 7th summit convened in Brussels in 2018. The minister have confirmed that we remain seized with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine through the African Peace Initiative. Eastern Europe members has played a key role in terms of youth development, particularly harnessing scholarship opportunities. It goes without saying that our relationship with the MENA region remains vital. We cannot hope to address the Israeli-Palestine question and the genocide in Palestine without cooperation from the Arab League and the Gulf country states, in particular countries such as Egypt, Qatar, UAE, and Turkey. The Asian and Middle East region represents 54% of the global economy, and South Africa's total trade with the region amount approximately to 1.2 trillion rand last year. South Africa members has a comprehensive strategic bilateral partnership with the People's Republic of China, premise on one China policy. It is anticipated that the state visit of President Ramaphosa to the People's Republic of China will present a unique and different strategic opportunity to South Africa to build on the state visit undertaken by President Xi Jinping during 2023. And in addition, it will further seek to cement and unlock further strategic political opportunities during FOCAD. The South Asian region remains important to South Africa and presents a myriad of opportunities in relation to economic diplomacy. With Japan, the Republic of Korea, and Australia, we enjoy healthy positive trade balances, which result in surplus gains for our exports. Deputy President Paul Mashatile visited the Southeast Asian region, in particular countries of Singapore and Vietnam in December 2023, to further cement and strengthen bilateral relations and in particular economic diplomacy. Our presence in the region has been improved through the entering of a strategic dialogue partnership with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. Honorable members, South Africa continues to enjoy good bilateral relations with the Middle East region, underpinned by traditional ties of solidarity and cooperation. We take exception to the statements made by the South African Jewish Board of Deputy Head Krengel, who characterized South Africa's former minister as anti-Semitic. In addition, the Times of Israel's Tim Fleck sought to ridicule South Africa's stance of solidarity with the Palestinian people by stating that, and I quote, "It turns out that the kafir was merely an elections prop," unquote. These two gentlemen and their constituencies should fully appreciate that South Africa's solidarity with the Palestinian people is embedded in the 1996 Constitution, which the founding provisions defined the South African Republic as a sovereign democratic state founded on the values of human dignity, achievement of equality, and advancement of human rights and freedom, non-racialism within and beyond our borders. Several high-level engagements with the Gulf states have sought to expand our bilateral cooperation, such as President Ramaphosa's state visit to Qatar and Deputy President Mashatili's participation in the inaugural Africa-Saudi Arabia Summit. South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, has increased its frequency of engagement with countries from the Levant region and is in the process of expanding our legal frameworks of closer collaboration with countries such as Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. Ladies and gentlemen, South Africa's foreign policy is Afrocentric and Pan-African in outlook, and we therefore pledge to advance the interests of the African continent through the AU Agenda 2063 on all international platforms where it has a presence. The contribution, therefore, of South Africa's Pan-Africanism will be a key feature in South Africa's foreign policy repository. I take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to probably respond to the Honorable Powell, which claimed that South Africa's foreign policy is inconsistent and incoherent in relation to the trust deficit between South Africa and its people because of our optics as it relates to the harmonized Zimbabwean elections that took place during 24 August 2023. I must take the opportunity to remind Honorable Powell that South Africa are subordinate, ladies and gentlemen, as a member of the AU and SADC, to the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. We are subordinate as an African state to the AU African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. And we must remind the Honorable Powell that, as Rosa Luxemburg said, freedom is always and exclusively, not necessarily the freedom for the one who thinks differently. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
I now invite the Honorable Kwankwa.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Minister, firstly, let's deal with this and get it out of the way. If 60% of your budget is spent abroad, it means that your budget has not declined by 5% in real terms. In nominal terms, yes, it has. But in real terms, you have to take the consolidated basket of exchange rates into account to consider exactly how much money you have in your kitty. You might actually establish, if you've done that you're actually sitting with 40% less approximately if you consider the currency depreciations over the years. So that kind of discussion needs to take place sooner rather than later with National Treasury to help you, because it erodes the ability, the spending power of the different missions around the world, and for them to be able to discharge their mandate and support economic diplomacy and international relations for the country. The second issue is that you are quite aware, excuse me, I beg your pardon, you are quite aware that Africa is quite advanced. I mean, people talk about it all the time in terms of the development of normative frameworks where you try to entrench a culture of peace and democracy around the continent. But the implementation of that is quite different. It's something that is like poles apart or like night and day. And this is where we should be coming in. Yes, significant work has been done in the conflict between Israel and Palestine, but we're failing dismally in terms of what we're doing on the African continent. I want you to take you to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the province of North Kivu, for example, which is the eastern part. The conflict now, we are told, has spread to the southern part of that very same province. And not enough is being done by South Africa in that score. Apart from doling out money using the African Renaissance Fund, where we believe that we should not just be giving out funding without actually forcing people and compelling governments to undertake reforms that are going to ensure a culture of peace and a culture of human rights. Because some of the countries which have benefited from 2019, from the almost R500 million that we've given out to the African continent, are human rights violators, and we have not held them to account insofar as that is concerned. Consider what is happening, for example, in the conflict in South Sudan. 9 million people have been displaced. Tens of thousands have been killed there. The same can be said about the Democratic Republic of Congo. But because they are black, you don't hear about that in the media. The focus is only on people who look different, who do not look like me, right? And that requires us to actually be firm in how we address and deal with these challenges. And we gave money, by the way, over the period I've mentioned, to South Sudan as well. We have not tracked whether or not there's social impact. That is covered in the report. I think that is critical in terms of us checking whether there's social impact and whether the money that we give out to some of these countries is spent where we are intending it to be spent. It benefits our people, ordinary citizens, and then they undertake important reforms. Thank you ever so much. Support the budget.
I invite the Honourable Maimane.
Deputy Speaker, Chairperson, honorable members, Bagaetsho dumelang. Let me first of all congratulate Minister Ronald Lamola and the Deputy to the appointment of Cabinet. I think it's important that generationally, a generation of young people begin to take the advance going forward, if you still would consider yourself in that way. I think in considering today's budget, it's going to be crucial that we remind ourselves of two critical pillars that we must work from, those of promoting trade and equally so standing up for human rights. I do think our foreign policy as a country needs to remind itself, and I would urge members that form part of the Government of National Unity, as I've requested even to President Ramaphosa, that there must be indeed a convention so that we align on priorities as to how we go forward. You cannot federate in any way foreign policy that each of the parties represented in the GNU hold particular views, where if we're going to achieve a sustainable foreign policy, we're going to have to align on policy so that we can lead the people of this country and so that our policy is always pronounced on the basis of our national interest. I do feel at times that historically we've held on to an ideologically Cold War-like foreign policy that has not served our national interests, and we need to think hard. Fellow South Africans, I do think that going into this next and seventh administration, we need to think hard about our relationships in Africa. A prosperous Africa is indeed within our grasp, given that the economy of Africa now can represent well over 450 billion rand. And as Bossa, as a Pan-Africanist, I certainly believed that this is an opportunity for us not only to talk about trade relations in Africa, but to build infrastructure going into the continent, ensure that the Africa Free Trade Area is enhanced. We make sure that visa adjudications are focused, and ultimately we make it possible for us to trade with our fellow African brothers. It is of deep concern that even as we sit at the moment, the AGOA Act is being considered by the US, and this will have profound impact on what we do as a country, and I think we need to look forward to ensuring that we strengthen that. I want to reaffirm that globally our position on defending human rights must never fall short, and therefore call for the ceasing of war in the Middle East, ensuring that if we are consistent on our non-alignment policy, that we look at what is going on in Russia and Ukraine and call for a stopping of war all over the world. I genuinely believe, fellow South Africans, that if we are going to be focused in our region and spend money there, we cannot dismiss the fact that the elections in Zimbabwe were rigged, and South Africa must take a role in ensuring that there are free and fair elections. I look forward to us ensuring that the G20 summit next year is a great success, and believe that we can enhance our trade policy and our human rights position globally if we get it right. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Honourable members, before I call the next speaker, I just want to make sure, Honourable Douglas, that was your maiden speech, and I just want to record it as such that it was your maiden speech. I now call on Honourable Advocate Sali, whose maiden speech it also is.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Minister, honourable members, and to all present, I greet you in the universal greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum. In her debate on the budget for 2023-2024 financial year, former Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor emphasized on the importance of strengthening partnerships to forge a more just and equitable global system. It is thus encouraging to see that DIRCO's strategic plan on its vision as from 2020 to 2025, amongst others, includes a just and equitable vision on the African continent. However, This should be filtered globally as emphasized by the former minister. South Africa has taken a brazen and just stance on humanity when it took the Zionist Israeli entity to the International Court for Justice for genocidal acts against Palestinians. The former minister's emphasis on strengthening partnerships to forge a more just and equitable global system remains relevant today. Has this 2024-25 budget considered that South Africa's continuous fight for the genocidal case against Israel, not only strengthening support for Palestine, but also for other occupied countries, as the case of Western Sahara, the Arab Republic, and Kashmir? Despite a slight decrease in 2023-2024 budget, the country gained an increase in foreign direct investments, especially in its partnership with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, where investment of about 1.4 trillion rand was achieved. Since the trade, industry and competition is one of the department's clusters, what is the department's position on the latest trade with the Zionist Israeli entity? While promoting solidarity with the Palestinians' liberation struggle, South Africa trades with Israel remains strong. The trade, industry and competition exports of vehicles, aircraft and vessels has tripled since 2017 to 2023 to an amount close to 108 million rand. Other goods, live animals, vegetables, mineral products, chemicals, etc., amounts to almost 3 billion rand exported goods to this apartheid state. This is rather hypocritical. Returning to my point on strengthening to forge a just and equitable global system, as much as we want to see economic growth and good relations on a global level, at the same time, we must ensure that such relations are aimed to create a just and equitable system regionally on the African continent and globally. As soon as South Africa's new cabinet was announced, we saw how the new Minister of International Relations and Cooperation was pounced on by the United States, reminding South Africa to further foment its bilateral relations. Al-Jamaa calls on South Africa to remain steadfast on the undertaking given to strengthen bilateral engagements and relations with African agenda. We call on the Minister of Justice and Cooperation to follow in the footsteps of his predecessor by increasing South Africa's solidarity with Palestinians and other occupied countries to further pursue South Africa's genocide case against the criminally minded Zionist Prime Minister for its genocidal attacks on Palestinians. South Africa must continue to support and improve its solidarity efforts for the conviction of Israeli Prime Minister, for the liberation of Palestine, occupied Western Sahara, Kashmir, the RIF Republic, to increase solidarity with Cuba, who is under economic blockade from the West, and to play a fundamental role in bringing about peace in South Sudan, Mali, Libya, and so many others. Al-Jamaa does not support a two-state solution. Al-Jamaa supports
Honourable
a one-state
Member.
solution.
Honourable Member, your time has expired. I have allowed you half a minute extra as it is your maiden speech.
We cannot claim ownership of land through a genocide. Al-Jamaa supports the budget with concerns, and we will be holding an observational role surrounding this budget. I thank you.
GNU.
On my list is now the NCC, but I do not see a speaker from the party, so we will proceed to the Honourable Thring.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the ACDP believes that the importance of this Department of International Relations and Cooperation with the reduced budget allocation of 6.5 billion for the 24-25 financial year cannot be underscored. We note that in terms of the mandate of this department, international agreements that are not of a technical, administrative, or executive nature will only bind the country after being approved by Parliament. Parliament also approves ratification or accession of the country to multilateral agreements. All international agreements must be tabled in Parliament for information purposes. In this regard, the ACDP is concerned about the silence of developments regarding the WHO's International Health Regulation Amendments and Pandemic Treaty, which, if passed, and at the threat of a pandemic risk, will give the WHO, an unelected international body, unfettered powers to impose lockdowns on sovereign nations and sanctions on nations that do not comply. Nations that have signed or agreed to the IHR amendments and the pandemic treaty risk losing their sovereignty if the WHO just suspects that there is a pandemic risk. This department's overall mandate is to work for the realization of South Africa's foreign policy objectives, which include protecting of South Africa's sovereignty and territorial integrity, amongst others. The ACDP cautions that DIRCO should not adopt a hypocritical foreign policy position, having a non-aligned position on China's abuse of Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic religious minorities in Xinjiang, and a non-aligned position in the Russia-Ukraine war, yet adopt an aligned position with Hamas, who have committed to the genocide of Jews, publicly stating, first the people of the Saturday, the Jews, and then the people of the Sunday, the Christians. This department cannot be silent on the slaughter of 1,800 Christians in northern Mozambique currently taking place, or on the more than 50,000 Christians slaughtered in a genocidal campaign waged by Islamists across the parts of sub-Saharan Africa, who are urged by their Islamic State spokesman or ISIS spokesman, Abu al-Ansari, to kill them, that is Christians, wherever you find them. The ACDP urges the minister to use the department's resources in a consistent manner to foster a spirit of peace, protecting our sovereignty, and creating an enabling environment for South African businesses. I thank you.
I now invite the Honourable Smith. This will also be his maiden speech.
Deputy Speaker, a nation's foreign policy is largely swayed by the government elected to dispense it. And while the 2024 general election broke, for the very first time since the dawn of our democracy, the ANC's political majority, it also set South Africa on a new path in terms of its foreign affairs. No longer is our country's foreign policy the political diktat of the African National Congress, and no longer can South Africa's foreign policy be captured and bent to singular political will. For as the government of national unity reflects the desires of the South African people, so this new government's foreign policy must reflect their interests in our relations with stakeholders beyond our borders. Just as South Africa is governed by the values and principles enshrined in our Constitution, so must our foreign policy seek to promote and uphold these ideals on the international stage. For these are the values that define us as South Africans, and they are the values with which our foreign policy must now become synonymous. Deputy Speaker, the state of global affairs and the subsequent geopolitical shifts during the 6th Parliament marked a turning point not only for South Africa, but for the world as a whole. The rise of conservative and isolationist governments, coupled with an escalation in violence and breakout conflict in Eastern Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, have forced the global community to reassess and reconsolidate the value system upon which we hope to build our shared future. In this environment, it was encouraging to see South Africa find its diplomatic voice and take, for the very first time, a more decisive approach to our foreign policy. However, it could be argued that even this newfound diplomatic initiative under the former ANC government was driven by political gain. This is evident in the inconsistent application of our value set in our diplomatic efforts and our deafening silence in global affairs where our voice is sorely missed. It is evident in South Africa's influence in affairs which bear no fruit for the South African people and our continued paralysis on international issues that have a direct bearing on our people and on our government. Deputy Speaker, in a groundbreaking judgment by the Constitutional Court just a few months ago, the Democratic Alliance won a court case against the Independent Electoral Commission, ordering South African consulates, even those headed by honorary consuls, to serve as voting stations and facilitate the casting of electoral ballots by eligible South African voters living abroad. This judgment would have created a crucial precedent for our country in advancing our cherished democracy, were it not for the incapacity of the international outposts to carry out even the most basic of consular services. Of the 58,802 eligible overseas voters, only 39,116 cast their ballots in this year's election, equating to a turnout of just 67% internationally. And aside from the failures of the IEC to adequately administer our election, it is the Department of International Relations and Cooperation that failed to prepare our consulates to administer the most fundamental consular service for citizens living abroad. Too busy was South Africa filing papers at the International Court of Justice to ensure that South Africans around the world could exercise their most fundamental constitutional rights. I trust that the Minister will rectify this urgently. Deputy Speaker, I noted at the President's inauguration a few weeks ago the attendance of Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa. While many elected African heads of state were invited to attend this auspicious occasion, we can no longer allow the ANC to conveniently ignore the crisis of democracy on South Africa's doorstep. If our foreign policy is now rooted in values and not political expediency, and if this government wants to employ a more decisive diplomatic approach, we need to start focusing far closer to home. The people of Zimbabwe need a South African watchdog for their democracy, not a South African lapdog for the ZANU-PF. And I trust Minister Lamola that this new foreign policy under the government of national unity will no longer entertain political despots and dictatorships in our region purely because they suit the ANC's agenda. We cannot preach democracy in a rules-based global order when we allow African leaders to capture elections and betray their citizens. Deputy Speaker, it is essential that this department enforce a detailed set of performance targets on all of South Africa's ambassadors. Ambassadorial appointments can no longer serve as paid overseas holidays, nor a convenient means to sweep ANC corruption under the diplomatic rug. We must ensure that our foreign missions deliver tangible results that benefits our people and our economy, and we need performance assessments for ministers and for ambassadors in equal measure. Deputy Speaker, in closing, this new government of national unity must translate into a foreign policy of national unity which reflects the will and the needs of the South African people. Our Constitution provides the perfect blueprint for a principled foreign policy that both advances our domestic interests while developing our region and our continent. As this new government presents itself to the world, I trust that South Africa will be seen as a principled nation that upholds our constitutional values. South Africa cannot allow itself to be used as part of a plot by some nations to destabilize the global system and the universal values which underpin it. We must lead with our constitutional values that so many fought and died for. It will be up to this administration to ensure that we do not betray the bedrock of our country's existence, and it will be the responsibility of this parliament to ensure that our foreign policy serves the South African people and not its politicians. I thank you.
Honourable members, I now invite the Honourable A. Kumbatha, also delivering her maiden speech.
Honourable Minister Lamola, Honourable Deputy Minister Botas, Honourable Deputy Minister Mgina, Madam Deputy Speaker, distinguished guests and fellow South Africans. It is a profound honor to stand before you today as we affirm the ANC-led government of national unity's unwavering commitment to a foreign policy anchored in human rights, constitutionalism, national interest, and global cooperation. This commitment aligns seamlessly with the visionary Africa Agenda 2023, a blueprint for transforming our continent into a global powerhouse of the future. We cannot expect the Africa we want to exist without this agenda, and we cannot expect to live our African dream without this agenda. At the core of South Africa's foreign policy is securing the peace, stability, and prosperity of the African continent. The department's focus on the African agenda is premised on the fact that South Africa is an integral part of Africa, and our national interest is linked to the stability, unity, and prosperity of the continent. An important guiding framework in the pursuit of Africa's prosperity is the Africa Agenda 2063, which is about building the Africa we want and connecting the Africa of yesterday to the Africa of today and the Africa of tomorrow. We cannot leave this agenda behind if we're intentional about Africa's prosperity. Our foreign policy is not only an extension of our domestic policy, but also a reflection of our national values. The principles of human rights, dignity, and equality are at the core of our international engagements. The cornerstone of our foreign policy is economic diplomacy that is pivotal in attracting new investments and supporting local industries through international partnerships. The Department of International Relations and Cooperation, also known as DIRCO, has been instrumental in creating a conducive environment for South African businesses to thrive abroad. The 2024 budget earmarks a substantial resources to bolster these efforts, reflecting our dedication to economic growth and development. The people of Mzansi Africa must not struggle to access the global markets under our watch. We are committed to leveraging our diplomatic relationships to create economic opportunities for our citizens. This includes fostering trade agreements, facilitating business delegations, and ensuring that our embassies and consulates serve as hubs of economic activity. We will drive economic growth through strategic international partnerships and investments that uplift our local industries and create sustainable jobs for our people. This underscores the critical role that DIRCO plays in promoting South Africa as a prime destination for foreign investment and a reliable trading partner. South Africa has made significant strides in regional peace initiatives, contributing to stability and security across Africa. Our peacekeeping missions in various conflict zones have been instrumental in fostering peace and rebuilding war-torn communities. Over the past year, we have strengthened our collaboration with regional organizations like the African Union to ensure sustained peace and security. Our efforts in countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, and Somalia have not gone unnoticed. We have provided crucial support in terms of both human and material resources to stabilize these regions. Our peacekeeping troops have displayed exemplary courage and professionalism, earning South Africa a reputation as a reliable partner in peace. Looking forward, South Africa will continue to play a proactive role in peace-building efforts within Africa and beyond. Through Program 2, 3, and 5 of the department, the African continent has been strategically engaged both as a result of bilateral activities as well as South Africa's continued participation in regional organizations such as SADC. Despite facing budgetary constraints in recent years, the department must be commended for its work in supporting the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Honorable members, another mechanism through which South Africa is able to engage meaningfully with the African continent as a whole is the African Renaissance Fund. The ARF is an entity of the department which was established to enhance cooperation between the Republic and other countries, in particular African countries. We have been very intentional about the African agenda. Through numerous humanitarian interventions, training programs, and dialogues aimed at enhancing peaceful resolution of conflict, the ARF has shown a commitment to promoting South Africa's national interests and values. With conflicts such as the impasse currently unfolding in Sudan, it is entities like the ARF that can make a profound contribution to the diplomatic and humanitarian factors. As legislators, we are tasked with conducting oversight, but we also have to be mindful of how we help entities like the ARF improve through suggesting changes to policy and legislation. Honorable members, in line with these priorities, South Africa plans to allocate 652.6 million over the next 3 years for UN membership. This funding is budgeted within the membership contribution sub-program of the International Transfers Program. This strategic investment underscores South Africa's commitment to international cooperation and its role in supporting global efforts for a more sustainable and equitable future. Through these contributions, South Africa reaffirms its dedication to upholding international norms and advancing collective goals for peace. In addition to pursuing the African agenda through the participation of the AU and making strategic use of the ARF, South Africa has also sought to ensure that interests of the African continent are recognized within global institutions of governance like the United Nations. South Africa remains unwavering in its commitment to human rights, global solidarity, and initiatives with the UN Rights Council. We will continue to champion anti-racism and support marginalized regions and advocate for policies that promote dignity, equality, and justice for all. We are acutely aware of the challenges faced by marginalized communities worldwide, from the Rohingya crisis to the struggles of the Palestinian people. South Africa has constantly called for justice and humanitarian support. Our leadership in the UN Rights Council will focus on amplifying these voices and pushing for concrete actions to address this plight. The 2024 budget reaffirms our dedication to these values by allocating resources to initiatives that fight against racism and support human rights globally. We will stand firm against all forms of discrimination and work tirelessly to support the oppressed and marginalized, ensuring that their voices are amplified in the global stage. South Africa's strategic participation in the BRICS and the non-aligned movement and our preparations for our G20 chairmanship are central to our foreign policy agenda. Our participation in BRICS has brought significant benefits such as enhanced trade relations, joint development projects, and knowledge sharing in science and technology. Trade with BRICS nations, particularly China, has grown substantially, with trade volumes surpassing 900 billion in 2022. Other outcomes of the BRICS summit include a decision of leaders of the BRICS countries to reduce dependency on the US dollar and to increase the pace of the dollarization in global commerce. Honorable Chairperson, our participation in the non-aligned movement remains a critical aspect of our foreign policy. We believe in the power of multilateralism and the importance of diverse voices in shaping a fair and just international order. In this regard, we are committed to the attainment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals through aligning our foreign policy. We are working diligently to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and ensuring that no one is left behind. Through our diplomatic channels, we are advocating for increased global cooperation to address these pressing issues. Honorable Chairperson, the 2024 budget for international relations and cooperation is a testament to our resolve to drive economic diplomacy, foster peace, and engage multilaterally for a sustainable and just order. By aligning our efforts with the Africa Agenda 2063 and the principles laid out in our policies, we are paving a way for a prosperous and equitable future for all South Africans. We must remember that the department finds itself in a world with growing complexities while having to implement South Africa's foreign policy within a constrained fiscal framework. As I close, Steve Biko says, and I quote, "The great powers of the world may have done wonders in giving the world an industrial look, but the great gift still has to come from Africa, giving the world a more human face." Let's continue with our efforts in the global stage, giving the global stage a human face, a unique face that will dismantle a system that affects us all in various ways. Let us continue to work together and be united in our commitment of these noble goals. I urge this esteemed House to support the 2024 budget to enable South Africa and Africa to remain a proactive, influential, and compassionate player on the global stage. Thank you.
Honourable members, I now invite the Honourable Minister of International Relations and Cooperation to close the debate.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable Powell and Mutwedi. I think you agree on wrong things with regards to the GNU. Maybe I should repeat what the statement of intent says. The GNU is an ANC-led government of national unity. The government of national unity statement of intent.
On a point of order, Speaker. On a point of order, Speaker.
There is
On a point of order, Speaker.
Honourable Minister, can you please take your seat?
On a point of order, Speaker.
Honourable Gola.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. You have the minister on the podium, but I think honorable members on the floor are drowning him. And you all understand that even though they are allowed to hail, but they're not allowed to drown the speaker. Can you then protect your speakers? This is not the first speaker that has been drowned, actually. This House has been behaving like that. Please intervene, Deputy Speaker, on our behalf, the people of South Africa. Thank you very much.
Honourable member and honourable members.
Yeah.
Honourable members, if I cannot take another point whilst I'm busy with a point of order. So, honourable members, yes, there has been some heckling, some trying to drown out, but but I do use my judgment. And at this particular point, it was becoming very difficult to hear the Honorable Minister. And everyone has been listening to everyone. And in this House, we do have the practice of freedom of speech, which we do allow and which I have allowed. So I just ask your indulgence and your respect for the rules of the House, that we allow speakers, you may heckle, but not to the extent that the speaker at the podium is inaudible. Thank you. Honorable Minister.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, just on a point of order.
Honorable Minister, if you can just take your seat again. Yes,
Yes.
Honorable Member.
Yes, just 2 quick points, Deputy Speaker. I'm glad you clarified the issue that you are the presiding officer here, so no one else must dictate and tell you how to run this House. We've got full confidence that you can do it, so other people must wait. Number 2, the Honorable Minister must not mislead the House and say that the GNU is an ANC-led government. What? We know that it's led by the DA, and the DA is running the ship there, so we must not be misled. Thank you very much.
Honorable Member, as you have raised it as a point of order, I will rule on that. Honorable Member, that is a point of debate, and I cannot, as the presiding officer in terms of Rule 92, confirm the veracity or not of a statement. So we take it as your opinion. So the Honorable Minister may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. The statement of intent states the following. The Government of National Unity commits to a foreign policy guided by human rights, constitutional principles, the national interest, as well as solidarity and the peaceful resolution of conflict. And everything I have said here is guided by that. We are also guided by the National Development Plan, which has not changed. It's still a document of government. We are also guided by the South African Foreign Service Act, which is the policy of the South African government. So in all our work, that is what is guiding us, Honorable Powell. There's nothing new that has just fallen from heaven that will guide us going forward. And if you want to change anything, it will have to go through Parliament and the processes of this House. So as things stand, we are implementing existing policy. The foreign policy of the South African government has not changed. We will continue to implement it. And we have to state that we will do so consistently across the globe in various multilateral forums. And this is what leading scholars and professors across the globe have said about South Africa's role on human rights issues across the globe. This is according to Jill Billard, Associate Professor in Anthropology at the Geneva Graduate Institute, Anton Delary, Research Professor and Chair at the Michelson Institute, who is Honorable Powell to tell us. These people have been very clear. They are saying that South Africa has rescued international law in the global politics. South Africa's standing as a human rights champion cannot be questioned. South Africa is consistent in its human rights policy across the globe, and it is respected for that. This has also been confirmed during our application in the ICJ, which was supported by 1,090 scholars and practitioners of international law, and genocide studies and international studies. These are people of moral standing in the globe to tell us where we stand on human rights, not the Democratic Alliance. We will continue to implement the foreign policy. We will continue to stand by the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. We will continue to stand with the national interest document, which guides our work. We will continue to ensure that Agenda 2063 is implemented in the African continent, advocate for regional integration, advocate for beneficiation, advocate for building of capability in terms of manufacturing in the African continent. This is aimed to ensure that we benefit through the Africa Free Trade Agreement, because when we're able to manufacture, we're able to beneficiate, the African continent can be able to trade amongst its partners. And this will ensure regional integration. It will also help with our economic growth strategy as a country, which we have to ensure that our foreign policy helps the challenges of our country in terms of economic growth, job creation, and industrialization. We will also continue to play a leading role in the eastern part of the DRC in terms of peacekeeping missions. We will also do so in the southern part of Mozambique. This is a task we have in terms of the African Union and also the SADC initiatives for peace in the continent. This is a task we carry. We will also continue with the Renaissance Fund, because we will not only deal with peace and so forth, but we also have to ensure that there is social stability, there is also economic facilitation. That becomes the role of our fund. With regards to the ACDP, we have never looked at religious conflicts across the globe in terms of religious conflict, in terms of the religious length. We look at them in terms of human rights, in terms of what our constitution says. I'm not going to say anything about what the MK has submitted. It's a cacophony of confusion that does not take us anywhere. Thank you very much.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable
Madam
members.
Powell must fight back. Not good.
Could I please also just refer the member to the rules that you may not use the microphone if the speaker has in the chair has not recognized you, so please don't do that. And honorable members, with that then we conclude the debate and the business of this mini plenary session, and the mini plenary will now rise.